Good morning, everybody. Everybody out there ready? Here we go. 1, 2. There you go, everybody. I'm sitting on top of the world. Let me get the mic up here. Good morning. I am Ron Miscavige, and that was your culture enrichment time for the morning. Now, I like to do that because these are songs that were written, in many cases, about 100 years ago, and they still sound good, and that just goes to show you the brilliance of the songwriters and artists in those days, because still today, you go into some place that has a Dixieland jazz band and you say, I'd like to hear I'm Sitting on Top of the World. Boom, they'll play it just like that. Now, that was written in 1925 by Ray Henderson, and the lyrics were by Sam M. Lewis and Joe Young, and that was a big hit in those days. As a matter of fact, it was in a movie, but then who made it famous was a guy by the name of Al Jolson. You might not, though, because it's pretty esoteric stuff. He was in a movie called The Jazz Singer, but he introduced it in a movie in 1926 called The Singing Fool. Anyway, it's great stuff. That's I'm Sitting on Top of the World. So now, where would you go on the internet or TV and you want to hear an interview about quite a serious subject, and the guy comes on and plays a song that was written 50 to 100 years ago? I'll tell you, the only place you can go is here, and that's Life After Scientology, and I'm your host, Ron Miscavige. And I will tell you, we have a great subject for you today, and a great guest, and one of the more knowledgeable people I have ever met in my life. And he's knowledgeable because he researches everything he does with a fine-tooth comb. So when he's talking, you know he's talking from solid ground, not bullshit. And this program has a title already, but let me say, there was a statement made by L. Ron Hubbard saying, Scientologists are the most ethical group on the planet. So let's hear what Jeffrey Augustine has to say and see if that proves out in the narrative that's to follow. Good morning, Jeffrey.
Good morning, Ron. I always like Sunday morning when I hear a trumpet, it means another podcast with Ron Miscavige.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's a great horn. This horn was made in 1968, but it is modeled after the horn they developed with the custom bore and this thing, which is not on any other horn. It's tuning. It's called ARPA tuning. This horn had the same specifications as the horns made in the 1890s when it was developed. Anyway, let me put it aside.
Yeah. Great sound.
Yeah, it's a Con 80A. And supposedly it's a horn that Bix Beiderbecke, a terrific jazz player from the 20s, used to use. I heard he used other horns, but that was one of them. Anyway, getting back to the story, so let's see how this plays out, because now remember, L. Ron Hubbard said Scientologists are the most ethical people on the planet. Now, we're going to talk about a company called GPB. Why don't you kick it off, Jeffrey? Let's get right into it.
Sure. I've been covering this on my blog, the ScientologyMoneyProject.com. And there's a New York private equity firm called GBP Capital. And it's owned by a Scientologist named Denise Gentilly. So GBP Capital began in 2013, and it's a private equity firm. And briefly, you can buy stock in publicly traded companies like Amazon or Netflix, right?
Yeah.
And when you buy a publicly traded stock on the stock exchange, you have liquidity, which means I can buy Amazon on Monday, sell it Friday. or you sell it the next day, right?
Yeah.
That's called a liquid investment. It's like money in the bank. Your money's liquid. You can get to it right away. With private equity firms, you give them money, say $100,000, but they lock up your money for 7 to 10 years. So that's called illiquid. That is, you can't get to your money for 7 to 10 years. But in exchange, they offer you higher interest. So maybe they offer 8%, which would be phenomenal to get 8% on your money these days. Whereas your bank might give you 1% or less, right?
Right.
So David Gentilly created GPB Capital as a private equity fund. And he's raised, since 2013, an astonishing $1.8 billion, billion with a B. But the cracks in the dam started to appear maybe 2 years ago. I've been covering this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens, Ron, and I don't use this term lightly, but the firm's been accused now several times of being a Ponzi scheme. That means it takes in money from investors and pays old investors with the money from the new investors. Excuse me. So to keep a Ponzi scheme going, you have to keep money coming in.
Right.
Excuse me, Ron. So, excuse me, I apologize. So about 2 years ago, the firm started getting in trouble because its auditor withdrew and said it couldn't rely on 2015, 2016 financial statements, which is a big red flag. Like, what the hell, you're supposed to put out these statements according to the Securities and Exchange Commission guidelines, right?
Right.
And when you hear that we can't rely on these statements we issued you, it's a big red flag. So through a series of other events, the firm's just not giving information, and people are beginning to be suspicious, and lawsuits start to appear against the broker dealers who sold the private equity placements, they're called. They're just no name for buying shares in the company.
Mm-hmm.
And then a former insider named Patrick Debris sued the company, calling it a Ponzi scheme. And this is a lot of people. If you had $1 million invested with this company, or 60,000 or whatever, you'd be very nervous. So it made a lot of people nervous. It attracted a lot of attention. Now, February of this year, 2019, the firm's raided by the FBI. So headquarters is raided by the FBI. And one thing that GPB invested in is waste management in New York City, which automatically you think of the Tony Soprano and the Sopranos and waste management being mob connected in New York City. And Tony Soprano has a great scene where he tells his daughter that he's a waste management consultant. But GPB invested primarily in car dealerships, and then they branched out into healthcare and a lot of other things, and people thought they were going to get good returns for a long time. So when the FBI raid happened, the FBI raided headquarters and the headquarters of the waste management component of the company. So you're thinking, what the hell is going on? I mean, Ron, if you had money invested with a firm that was raided by the FBI, what would you think?
Well, I would be worried about my investment, obviously, because they just don't go willy-nilly and raid people for no goddamn reason at all. I mean, they've got to have some reason to go in there and pull that kind of stuff off.
Now, this is the funny part of PR spin, and this is a Scientology-like element. Because Scientology hires, damage control experts when they have stuff go down, right?
Right.
So when the FBI raided, a raid is called the execution of a search warrant. And normally what happens is the FBI doesn't call you ahead of time and say, hey, we're going to be dropping by your place. They just
I know.
show up and kick in the doors. So GPB said we had an unannounced visit by the FBI and we cooperated. Well, of course, wow. You don't have any choice because they're gonna put you in handcuffs and take you away if you don't cooperate. And in any event, they don't need your cooperation because they have a search warrant.
Right.
So they were raided and they spun it as just an unannounced visit, which I thought was funnier than hell. It's just about all you can do, right? Try to spin it to assure your investors that there must be some sort of misunderstanding. We like to say the FBI maybe just dropped by and said, hey, we were in the neighborhood, we thought we'd come by.
No.
So this made big news, right?
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, while we're here, can we have all your files and computers?
They did that?
And they took everything.
Whoa.
Yeah, Ray, they're going to get all the documents and computers, hard drives. An FBI search warrant will specify what they're looking for, which in this case, they're looking for financial records.
Right.
Electronic paper. Yeah, they're going to take everything. And then they're going to give it to forensic accountants to analyze, look for the pattern of how this alleged Ponzi scheme works. So then another, David Rosenberg, another former insider, he sold his car dealerships, Prime Automotive Group, to them. And he was the minority owner who ran the car dealerships. And Prime Auto sold purportedly $3.2 billion in sales in 2018.
Jesus.
So that's a lot of money. That's 6,600 cars. So they're supposed to be, paying this money, and they own car dealerships. Now, what happened, and this is really important to the story, because I like to update people on what's happening at this Scientologist-owned firm. And this is really interesting. Let's go back to October 2018, okay?
Yeah.
There's a guy working at the Securities and Exchange Commission. He's in the enforcement division. His name is Michael Cohn, C-O-H-N.
Mm-hmm.
You can Google this. Michael Cohn is working for the SEC, and so he has access to SEC computers. And in the process, it's alleged, while he was interviewing for a job with GBP Capital, a $400,000 a year job as their chief compliance officer, he accessed SEC computers and gave GPB insiders knowledge of what the feds had on them.
Wow.
Knowledge of the federal investigation. Here's what the feds know about you during their investigation. This is called obstruction of justice. If you interfere in an investigation, it's a felony for which you can receive up to 20 years in prison. And we're talking about serious prison like the federal penitentiary, Marion, Illinois, other places, right?
Yeah.
Now, Michael Cohn and GPB at the time don't know that the feds know about this. Now, we don't know how the feds found out about it. Maybe wiretapping an insider, we don't know. So they indicted Cohn in February 2018, right? Coincident with the FBI raid, but they didn't execute the indictment until about 2 weeks ago. So Cohn, after he gave them knowledge, he leaves the SEC, and 4 days later signs on as chief compliance officer. Now, Ron, basically compliance means when you run a financial business, you have to comply with SEC laws and regulations and all your legal, you have to comply with a lot of things. So the idea was, well, we hired this guy to get our house in order. That's how they spun it to the public. And you think, well, a former SEC official will get GPB in order. Maybe they were just bookkeeping, accounting compliance mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the guys actually gave them information. And so you don't know, is he going to go in there and reverse engineer things and try to tell the feds what they want to hear, because he already has an uneven advantage. So he went to work for them 4 days after he left the SEC. And so last week, or 2 weeks ago, when he was arrested, an indictment was handed down for obstruction of justice, and it said that Michael Cohn, along with others, engaged in obstruction of justice, and they haven't named the others yet, but they're GPB executives.
I got it.
So you have basically 2 weeks ago a U.S. Assistant Attorney General saying that GBP Capital operates as a Ponzi scheme. And you have a key insider arrested and charged with obstruction of justice and some other felonies in an indictment.
Well,
So
that's some pretty serious stuff, man. This is not, he's hooked up with the local numbers guy,
exactly. One other thing that happened, Ron, a little bit earlier, when you buy a stock like Amazon, right, Microsoft, it's on the New York Stock Exchange. It's listed.
Right.
So one thing that happens to bad companies is they get taken off the New York Stock Exchange, right,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever exchange they're on. And GBP Capital is no different. They're listed on an exchange, if you want to call it that. So going back earlier this year, Fidelity, who lists them on its platform, it's called a platform, threatened to take them off the platform because Fidelity said, we don't really know what you're worth. You're saying you've raised and managed 1.8 billion, but what are you really worth? And so the threat of being deplatformed, it's called, or taken off a platform, trading platform, they issued a knee-jerk statement saying their assets under management decreased from 1.8 billion to 1.1 billion.
Wait,
So
say
there's
that again now. It increased what?
No, it decreased
Decreased.
from 1.8 billion to 1.1 billion.
So that's
$700 million gone.
And what did they say? What happened to that money?
They didn't. They just said it was, they spun it. They did give particulars of how we lost $700 million.
Yeah. Oh, gee, I just realized I lost $700 million. Oh, well.
Yeah, let me check my wallet.
Yeah. Well, is this money that they could have paid the people like they do in a Ponzi scheme when the new people put money in, the old people who are waiting to get interest on it get money that new people pay in?
That's part of the Ponzi scheme. But in a lawsuit that was just filed on October 25th. Now, look at all this is, it's called Kinema Individual Retirement Account, individually and behalf of all others similarly situated. It's a class action. Look at all the plaintiffs.
Wow.
Okay, now we have for you a second page of plaintiffs. So this law firm is suing, I don't know, there's like 60 plus named defendants. They're suing all the broker dealers who sold this. And the lawsuit alleges that GBP Capital is a Ponzi scheme, that the broker dealers took, call it 10% commission, which is unheard of, and that the two owners, Mr. Gentilly and Jeffrey Schneider, took another 10%. So they're saying that 20% of your money you invested was gone off the top. Right. So if you put in 100,000, you're down to 80,000, which losing 20% of your initial investment up front is, you might as well leave your money in the bank at 1%.
Well, here, let's stop right here, because here is what. Well, of course, I can fathom how people think that way, because people get in Scientology based on being confident that what they receive at the beginning is going to hold true for the rest of the trip, which is nothing could be further from the truth. You come in and you see that, okay, here's a good communication course, or here's some low-level counseling I got, and I feel good, so I'm going to go all the way. Now, based on that, yeah, people do invest their life savings and their house, college education for their kids. So I can see if a person comes in and they start getting a little bit of money, and they say, well, I'm going to put more money into this because this sounds good. But on that point, how could you think, if they're taking management fees of 20% off, that you're still going to get 28%? What company is going to make 28% over their operating costs? They make a profit and still have 28% to give, so you can get 8%. Do you follow me, Jeffrey?
Yeah, exactly. And Ron, the point is GPB, it's alleged, did not tell the investors they were losing 20% up front, because nobody would take that. Because you're right, you'd have to make, according to the lawsuit, 35% just to stay even.
Yeah.
So part of the $700 million loss if you take 20% off up front, that's $380 million.
Yeah.
So that's half of the loss is going right to commissions. And the lawsuit's posted on my blog. It's up right now. It's 98 pages. It's highly detailed for people like me who love details of how this alleged Ponzi scheme works. It's really fascinating read. But going back to the Church of Scientology, you can argue that the Church of Scientology is a spiritual Ponzi scheme. It promises you exorbitant returns for your money.
Yeah.
But one thing I've been really emphasizing in my podcasts and my own work, and this is something Scientologists, members of the church, don't seem to get, and help me to understand here, Ron. Scientology's bridge to total freedom, as it's called. You go from the bottom all the way to OT 15, correct?
Well, no, it's only available to OT 8, but apparently.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Why, if Mr. Hubbard specified a range from OT 1 to OT 15, and the church says we can only give you up to OT 8, that's only half a bridge.
Yeah.
Why are you going to invest in something where I can't have all of it? Why haven't they delivered? And this goes to the GBP Capital. Did you deliver the results you said? Yeah. No, we got raided by the FBI. We're being sued by former insiders. We're being, one of our head guys was arrested on felonies. It doesn't add up, Ron. I've never understood why on a spiritual path you would say, yes, I'm willing to buy in, but stop at OT 8, and maybe OT 9 and 10 exist. But like L. Ron Hubbard died in 1986.
Yeah. So
you would think in those intervening years, let's do the math, 96, 06, 16, 33 years since Mr. Hubbard died, and they still don't have OT 9 and 10. What is the definition of a suppressive person in Scientology? One of them is, can I complete a cycle of action?
Yeah.
If I invested in the Church of Scientology, now in Dianetics, we're told that you will no longer need eyeglasses.
Yeah.
But come on, every photo we see of Scientology gatherings, people are getting older. They have eyeglasses.
Yeah.
They die, right?
Yeah.
Mr. Hubbard and Dianetics promised you wouldn't get colds. Well, that's not true. You wouldn't have your reactive mind. And then in Scientology, we show that we can go to OT 15 when in fact it stops at OT 8, which is still, and I'm getting a little esoteric here, but it's negative K-scape.
Yeah.
You're still not on the plus side of things. So to me, a couple questions occur. Why, Ron, would the Church of Scientology allow David Gentilly, one of its own members, to run a Ponzi scheme that's defrauding people? Wouldn't this have come up in his security checks?
Boy, you certainly would think so. You certainly would think so.
Why do they allow it to go on?
Well, he fell through the cracks as far as I'm concerned. I mean, either that or they lost control of him. And if they lose control of somebody, shit happens, man. And this is one of the things. Because it's same thing with Slotkin, who was a famous or a notorious Ponzi guy in Scientology years ago. He's dead now, but he ran it on staff members, on public Scientologists, on many celebrities. As a matter of fact, I know several of them that were taken down. These are famous people in Hollywood, which I'm not going to give their names because they're nice people. I know these people personally. They got fucked over. They got in a state of mind that they were willing to do this, and why throw them under the bus? I just don't want to do it. But Slotkin did it. He got people in a state of mind, and this Gentilly, I'm sure, does the same thing. He's a great talker, a great liar, I should say, and he's a convincing guy. He'll get you in a state of mind. The same thing as the Church of Scientology. Over time, over being indoctrinated into everything they're telling you is true, you get indoctrinated into a state of mind, and you think, well, I can't go wrong. I'm going to keep on moving up the bridge. I'll get these gains on my next step. And this is bullshit. I was in for 42 years. I never met one person who could go exterior with full perception and get out of their body without the means of their eyes, see things at a distance or maybe even in the next room. I never met one person. I did meet several people who pretended they had this, and they'd have an excuse why they didn't want to do it, that if they did it in front of you, you may get sick or you may feel bad. And it was complete horseshit. But it's the state of mind that they can get you in. The same thing as Gentilly and his co-criminal partners did with their public. They get you in a state of mind thinking, well, boy, this guy's got to be telling the truth. He sounds great. I'm going to get into this. Same thing with the Church of Scientology. And that's my answer. It's the state of mind that they can get you in where you're then ripe for picking, you know?
Yeah, Ron, this is an interesting point because part of it is the abuse of trust.
Yeah.
GPB Capital presented themselves as experts in investment. So people, especially older people, think, well, I'm not an expert in investing money, and these guys in New York City must be real experts in making money. So I trust them.
That's it. Wait. That's a great point, Jeffrey. What you just say that again, because this makes sense. They're in New York. They must know what they're doing, right?
Well, they're in New York City, financial capital of the world. Well, there's City of London, but they're financial experts in New York City, and they're positioning themselves. And let's just draw a parallel. L. Ron Hubbard and the Church of Scientology positions themselves as the authorities on the mind, the experts on the mind,
right?
The experts at getting people off drugs. And Tom Cruise went that. The experts on literacy, the experts on solving problems, right?
Yeah.
But experts on the mind. There was a sales campaign Jefferson Hawkins did in the 1980s where they promoted Dianetics on television as the owner's manual for the human mind.
Right.
Think, oh wow, that's great because I don't get an owner's manual. And when you have a baby, you don't get an owner's manual to be a parent.
Yeah.
So when you have a mind, you think, gosh, I'd love to read this book that's the owner's manual on the human mind. So again, you trust an authority figure who presents himself or herself as an expert. So both in Scientology and with GPB Capital Financial Investment, they hold themselves as experts while concealing the truth.
Yeah.
To wit, they can't deliver what they promise.
Yeah.
GPB Capital not only cannot deliver an 8% return, but now one of its former chief compliance officer is looking at 20 years in prison. And now we're seeing more and more lawsuits come against GPB Capital. And likewise, we're seeing lawsuits against the Church of Scientology, alleging horrendous things.
Yeah.
So that's a good parallel. You're referring to the Reed-Slatkin fraud. You can Google it. The man's first name is Reed, R-E-E-D. Second name Slatkin, S-L-A-T-K-I-N. Reed-Slatkin was a Scientologist who in the 90s pulled off one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. Now, Bernie Madoff made him look small, right?
Yeah.
Bernie Madoff, by the way, got 150 years in prison. I was researching federal sentencing guidelines for Ponzi schemes, and there was a Japanese doctor who just got 50 years for a Ponzi scheme that was about the size of GPB Capital. So you're looking at a hard time. But it's the abuse of trust. Yeah. And it's the promise of if you give us money, you'll get 8% return, or you'll have OT supernatural abilities.
Yeah.
And you don't need to do it. You could just take the other path where you say, we'll help you in life, or we'll get you 2%, 3% return, right?
Yeah.
So if Scientology makes a person more ethical, how is it that they and I'm not talking about all Scientologists, Ron. Please I don't want your audience to misunderstand. We're talking about David Gentilly.
Exactly.
Okay, so if Scientology is supposed to make you so ethical, why the hell did you become such a criminal? And why didn't the church expel him, Ron? Why doesn't I did a podcast with Chris Shelton, and Chris, gave what I thought was an excellent opinion, and I think you'll agree with Chris, because I did. He said that when the FBI raid happened on GBP Capital, COB, RTC, David Miscavige would have known about it in a very short amount of time.
Absolutely.
True?
Within minutes.
Okay, so what happens when COB gets a call? Hey, we got a Scientologist. The FBI just raided his offices. What happens?
Well, I don't know what happens because I was never there when anything like that happened. But seeing as the operating basis of Scientology is to make sure their public relations image is not hurt, I would think that you want to distance yourself from the guy.
Well, don't you declare him a suppressive person, or is that you wait to see how it plays out?
That would be, to my way of thinking, or not necessarily my way of thinking, but to the observable pattern that the church has taken, that would be the thing to do. That guy's a suppressive person. He was never any good to begin with. He's a crook, and this is not in keeping with the good, high ethical standards of the Church of Scientology, because we only will take money away from people to make them bankrupt, but we don't take away huge sums of money like that. You know what I mean? And although I'm being cynical, but I mean, there's a lot of fucking truth in what I'm saying here. All right, but
sure.
Yeah, declare the guy a suppressive person or distance yourself from him somehow. In other words, sweep him under the rug. Like, well, this guy is not part of us or whatever. Now, yeah, look at truthfully, I can't give you a straight answer. But I would say the straightest answer is to declare him a suppressive person.
Sure. And Ron, you could even split the difference. You could say, look, everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So we're going to take you off of auditing, and until you get this sorted out, you're not allowed in the church.
Yeah.
So they could split the difference.
Yeah, they could.
And this goes back to the 90s when you were in the church and Reed Slacken was perpetrating his fraud on other Scientologists.
Yeah.
And this happens in all kinds of faith communities and other communities. It's called an affinity fraud. People, a con artist will go after a group like Christians.
Yeah.
And he or she will prey upon people with whom they have an affinity, other Christians, other Mormons, other Scientologists. Now, when you were in the church and Reed Slacken was perpetrating his fraud, weren't you warned not to invest with him by other Scientologists?
I personally was not told to do that because that would be like telling me, now, Ron, just remember you have to breathe in and out all day to live. I mean, I wasn't in a position that I would even consider doing that. But I can remember Hansuli Stali, who was a member of RTC, coming into the FSC, the Flag Service Consultant Office in Los Angeles, and there is a registrar there by the name of Jeff Mintz. And I can remember Hansuli Stalin saying to Jeff Mintz, listen, you got to get away from this guy. He's bad news. I mean, he made it just as clear as you possibly could. Don't get involved. This guy's fucking no good. And Jeff was in a state of mind where he says, no, these guys okay. In other words, Jeff's mind was already taken over by Reed. Reed convinced him that Reed Slotkin, I'm a good guy. Why are people picking on me? Look, I buy services. So Jeff thought he was a good guy. Now, later on, I hear that Jeff went down for quite a few dollars that he invested in it, and he lost it. And this, he was in a position of making nice sums for regging people, selling people services because you get a bonus. So he had the capability of investing. The average Sea Org member making $25 or $50 a week, all depending on what you're getting paid, just doesn't have the capability. But I do remember Hansuli Stali saying, hey, listen, don't get involved. And now
that's interesting, Ron. Let me just interject. Yeah. This goes to Scientology as well as to victims of fraud. For example, once you get so emotionally invested in something, you don't want to believe it's a fraud.
Exactly.
So you become clear in the Church of Scientology. You don't have a reactive mind. And L. Ron Hubbard teaches that you're in the danger zone if you don't get up and onto OT3 as quick as possible, correct?
Right, exactly.
So it's like, this is good news. I don't have my reactive mind. But the bad news is you're really in danger unless you get onto OT3 as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So you're going to put what? You're going to put another $50,000 to $100,000. That means more credit card debt, second mortgage on your house.
Yeah.
Because you need to get to OT3 to get out of the danger zone, the non-interference zone, they call it, between clear and OT3.
Yep.
So once people don't want to admit they've been conned, nobody does, Ron. That hurts, right?
Listen, I'm going to tell you something, Jeff. I also do a thing called life lessons, which, do you know about that?
No, tell me about it.
Oh, well, it's short little things they do that run anywhere between 8 and 12 minutes. And they're little videos, and I relate stories in my own life and how a person can learn from this and maybe you lead a more successful life. There's no other purpose in it other than trying to give young people or even old people, it doesn't matter, a little bit of a lift up. Because, look, I'm aged. I've lived a long life. I've had a lot of adventures, and I've learned from them, which, thank God, I do have that capability of doing. And I've done about 12 of them so far. They're called Life Lessons by Ron Miscavige. If you go to my website, therealronmiscavige.com, you'll see what I'm talking about. And the next lesson I'm going to give is going to be on the hardest thing a person can do. The hardest thing. There's an earlier one called relative importance. There's other ones that are very important. But the hardest thing a person can do, do you know what it is? And
No.
it is extremely hard. Admitting you are wrong. And I want people to stay tuned to hear that one because you will benefit from it. Anyway, there's a little side commercial for my own other program I do. But you said it right there, just before I went into that little dialogue, that admitting you're wrong is, it could be the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life.
Ron, let me take it a deeper cut. What I said was admitting that you've been conned. That's quite different from admitting you're wrong. And the reason I want to draw a distinction.
Yeah, but wait a minute, Jeff. I will.
Yeah.
I'm not going to argue with you, but I want to make my point. Admitting you were conned is also admitting you were wrong. It might be a different way to say it, but that's how I got out of the church, because a friend of mine, Fernando Gamboa, said to me on the phone one day, Ronnie, let's face it, we were conned. And I went into my entrance to the house and looked in the mirror, and I said, Ron, you were conned. And at that point, the wrongness of my actions came full tilt right in my face. I said it to myself. That was a tough thing to do, to admit that I was conned. You're right, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and so I take your point there. You know, Ron, the older we get, their wisdom does come with age. Not to all people, because there's plenty of old fools out there.
That's true.
Who never learned. And but for people who do learn from their mistakes, and look, some of the lessons in life, some of the mistakes we make in life are very expensive. We pay for our sins.
Yeah.
There's no way of getting out of karma. You pay hell for your sins. And a lot of times your sins, where you're wrong, come about because of your own ignorance.
Yeah.
Or because you ignored the warning signs. You ignored the warning signs of danger.
That's a mouthful, Jeffrey. That is a mouthful.
Well, because you fundamentally trusted and did not investigate. You went against your own intuition.
Yep.
But there's other people, like with the GBP Capital, there's people who trusted these broker dealers, these hotshot salespeople who told them they could get, these salespeople were motivated by 10% commission. and having did corporate sales 30 years, Ron, when you do a deal, your time is finite, right?
Yeah.
It's better to invest your time in selling something worth $1 million than $100,000 because you'll make more money.
Yeah.
So what GPB did is incentivized these broker dealers by giving them 8 to 11% commission. Let's just call it 10%. So these people are going to preferentially sell this GPB paper over anything else because they'll make more money.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to basically prey on the trust of people who are ignorant.
Yeah.
Because anyone who's hearing an 8% return, the first thing I'd say is, let me investigate further because I'm skeptical. I don't believe it.
You're right.
And so Scientology, it's interesting. One of the first things they do is they promise you all the good stuff. If that doesn't work, then they'll find your ruin. They'll dial into what you fear most in life. That's the beginning for many people, as they find their ruin, their deepest, darkest secret, and they'll say, Scientology can help you with that.
Right.
And so these people feel, oh, what I'm hiding, my withhold, Scientology can help me with that, and they'll confess it. They'll give it up in session. They'll feel like they're handling their ruin. Well, the older you get, you want financial stability.
Right.
You want income you can depend on for the rest of your life.
Right.
And so this is one of those areas of ruin that the GPB scam has preyed upon with older people. Is we'll give you security as you get older in life. Your money will be safe with us, when that's not safe. So Scientology, for all of its claim being the most ethical group on the planet, did not make David Gentilly an ethical person. In fact, it made him quite the opposite. From every indication, he's a criminal.
Yeah.
Now, he's innocent until proven guilty, but when the FBI's raided your firm and your chief compliance officer just got taken down on obstruction of justice, all the red flags are there.
Yeah.
All the law firms are saying if you invested with GBP Capital, there are time limitations and you should take legal action. I'm not a lawyer, but if I were invested with GBP Capital, I would sure as hell would be consulting with an attorney who specialized in investment fraud.
Right.
That's what I would be doing. So once you know that you're a victim and you've admitted you're wrong, you have to take positive steps.
Right.
Like after you looked at yourself in the mirror and said, I've been conned, what was your first positive step away from Scientology?
It was to go on the internet and start looking at some of the things they said about L. Ron Hubbard that I wouldn't do prior to that. Because even though I got out, all I wanted to do was live my life. I was still a believer in the tech and quite a bit in L. Ron Hubbard, not 100%, but quite a bit. So then I started investigating. Well, wait a minute. I heard about these things called the affirmations. Let me see what this is. And I looked at it and I thought, Jesus Christ, man, this is L. Ron Hubbard. What the hell is this? And then the further investigation I did, it then led me into the philosophers of the late 1800s, early 1900s called the New Thought Movement. And there was guys like Atkinson, Master Key System by Charles Hannell. These are a bunch of writers that wrote about the mind. And if you go and get these books, and you can go on Kindle and get them for like 99 cents, you're getting what L. Ron Hubbard basically copy and pasted and called it Scientology, but gave a different twist to it, give it a different agenda. Whereas all these guys were doing was trying to tell people about their discoveries about the mind and how you could improve your life with it. So that led me into reading these things, and they've helped me quite a bit. And I saw where there's things in there that when I was reading them, I thought, Jesus Christ, L. Ron Hubbard copy and pasted this and put it into what he called Scientology. So that's what it led me to do. I started investigating it, so I'm going along right with your pattern, what you said. That's exactly what I do, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and I remember talking to you before you published your book, and saying that you didn't want to write a book, and I remember talking to you, and then the events that happened you were with the private investigators following you. If he dies, let him die.
Yeah,
that's pretty brutal stuff.
Well, not only that, then my daughter Denise, her husband Jerry Gentilly, by the way, apparently no relationship to this guy we're talking about.
No relationship.
At the door when I went to see them, after talking to him for 20 minutes, I said, what's the story here, Jerry? He says, well, the story is this. Denise and I are through with you and Becky forever. And at that point, I said, you know what? Fuck you. I'm writing a book. I'm going to do an
Yeah.
expose, and that's the reason I read. I read. Boy, whoop! I didn't have enough coffee this morning. That's the reason I wrote my book, Ruthless, as you can see it here. Can you see me on the screen or no?
Not right now.
Okay,
I'm looking at my camera.
Okay,
but I can see you over on. I have my monitors up in my control room here.
Okay, well, anyway, the book is called Ruthless Scientology, My Son David Miscavige and Me. And that, when it came out on May 6th in 2016, hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And I've been going since then, and I started this podcast, or whatever you call this, and I'm doing whatever I can to proof people up against being involved in Scientology or any other scams like that. Like a couple of weeks running, I had a girl who escaped from the Nyanda cult in India. Anyway, go on, Jeffrey. You were going to say something there.
Well, Ron, when you're just digressing, your book, 2016, it was a New York Times bestseller list. I remember talking to you on the phone. How old were you in 2016?
In 2016?
Yeah.
Let's see. I guess I was 78.
Yeah, I remember. So I asked you. I said, Ron, you're a New York Times bestseller, and you're 78 years old. That is fucking amazing. And it shows that no matter how old you are, you can always have the power of your voice to speak out and accomplish things.
Yeah.
Age is no barrier to speaking out or accomplishing things. Neither is youth. You can be 16.
Well, and if you think it's a barrier, then it's a barrier. But you got to adjust your thinking. Look, if you're above ground and walking, you can do anything you want to do.
Well, that's why, Ron, my Scientology Money Project blog, I started it with one post. And I remember I thought, well, I know a lot about money, contracts, legal stuff, legal shenanigans, business shenanigans, bullshit, plain old bullshit. Because in business, you have so many people approach you with cons, come-ons, hype.
Yeah.
And part of being a corporate guy is you act as a buffer to protect your company. And also just in everyday life, I remember one of my neighbors came over one day. He was living in Saugus, and he was talking about this miracle. This guy was selling this miracle stuff that was going to be an answer to contamination at golf courses, because golf courses use fertilizer and water, and there's pollution. And so this guy was in our neighborhood, and my neighbor was promoting him to just regular people like me, to put $25,000 in this miracle technology. And I knew enough chemistry to know it was bullshit.
Yeah.
And so I started the Money Project just based on life experience, because nobody was really focusing on, to the level I was anyway, on other people had, but I had a higher focus on money, legal, propaganda, lies. I was interested in doing what I was good at and what I was interested in. And that's one wonderful thing about the Scientology community of former members, critics, journalists. Everyone is good at something.
Yeah.
So you you find your particular audience and talk to it. And my blog has grown, and I get a lot of help and support behind the scenes. I really appreciate the people who help me and support me behind the scenes, because you need a team. We all work as a team, right?
Yeah.
To help each other.
Yeah.
So when in the course of being a Scientology critic, this GBP Capital fraud came to my attention, I realized that I could reach beyond Scientology and actually inform the public about this fraud. Because there's a lot of people who have nothing to do with Scientology, no interest in it.
Right.
But they have been defrauded by this company, and they need to know about it. So as an outgrowth of our work, just like your life lessons are reaching to people beyond Scientology, the story with GBP Capital goes beyond Scientology. It goes to the general public, but it's being perpetrated by a member of the Church of Scientology, a Scientologist, and the church is doing nothing.
Yeah.
Now follow me here. The Church of Scientology does nothing about a lot of things that are wrong. One of those points, Nation of Islam, virulently anti-Semitic group.
Yeah.
The Church of Scientology does nothing to tell Mr. Farrakhan being anti-Semitic, taking that position that Jews are evil, is something we will not tolerate. If you don't stop it, we'll revoke your license to practice Scientology. That doesn't happen.
Nope.
Louis Farrakhan was connected to Muammar Gaddafi, who was an international terrorist and murderer. The church did nothing. The church does nothing about a lot of things that are wrong. Child labor. Ron, child labor is so fundamentally evil. We're in the 21st century and you're using 10 and 12-year-old Sea Org members.
Yeah.
And the best the church says is, well, we follow all applicable child labor laws. You should never say that at all. You shouldn't use child labor.
Yeah.
Making people work for no money, no pension. I mean, Ron, you have exactly nothing for all the, 35 years you put into Sea Org?
No, 26 and a half.
So, okay, do you have a pension, 401k?
Absolutely not.
Nothing.
Absolutely
And
not.
and often you work for $1 an hour or less.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I tell people
Yeah.
I'm still working. Well, first of all, I enjoy playing music and I enjoy doing this.
Sure.
But I have to do it. It's,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, it's something that this is part of my life. Although, thank God I enjoy working. I will tell you that. I absolutely, I
Sure.
look forward to doing this as well as playing the gigs I do and everything.
Well, but the point I was making is there's things that go on in the Church of Scientology that have consequences in the larger outside world.
Yeah.
Like the GBP Capital fraud.
Yep.
And like I said, I don't know why they don't, at this point, why they don't make a statement about this situation, because it involves one of their members. And it's not enough to say, well, to just remain silent. I think they should make a statement about it. It's not enough to remain silent about child labor and say, well, we follow child labor laws, or the exploitation of its Sea Org members.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that Scientology withholds and doesn't say, and when it gets in trouble, it spins. It tries to do damage control,
Yeah.
or it makes it even worse by it goes on this rampage of fair game, and it goes revenge with hate pages. It attacks, smears, character assassination.
Yep.
So it's reacting the wrong way to real world situations. If you're the authorities on the mind, if your goal is a world without war, crime, or insanity, you can't get there by being at war with the world.
Yep.
By fair game campaigns, by acting in an completely insane manner, by destroying people financially and spiritually, preying upon your own members, bankrupting them spiritually and financially. So, I mean, a world without war, crime, insanity, you can't get it when you're fundamentally engaged in war, crime, and insanity. These credit card frauds at here in Los Angeles at the Celebrity Center.
Yeah.
One of them was a 75-year-old man. They had 3 young Sea Org women take him on an ice cream date. He suddenly $77,000 in credit card debt. Tony Ortega covered that,
Yeah.
and Granberry's working on it. So this pattern of fraud over the decades in which Scientology is engaged, GBP Capital is just a manifestation of it.
I think you're totally right, Jeffrey. And I'm telling you something, I think we've covered our subject this morning. I don't know how you feel about that, but do you feel we've kind of cleaned it?
Sure, and I do. And when we have further developments, because there's going to be further developments, as one law firm put it last week, the other shoe is going to drop with GBP Capital. We'll do another podcast.
And you just give me a call, and you're on the air the next week. I'll just make room for you, because these are well-informed and well-researched narratives that you're giving, and I really appreciate it. So
well, thank you.
Let me do a little commercial here. If you enjoy this and you feel enlightened, I invite you to become a patron. And it's easy to do. Just go to my website, therealronmiscavige.com, and you can contribute $1 or $2 or $5 or whatever you want per month. That would help the ongoingness of this tremendously. And the other thing, though, you can do, and if you don't want to become a patron, is just subscribe to it, but then hit the bell. Somebody told me that you should hit the bell, and that would do something, which I don't know what, but it came to me from a good authority. Subscribe and hit the bell. So anyway, Jeffrey, I thank you very much. This has been a wonderful time talking to you. And I am Ron Miscavige. This is Life After Scientology. I'll see all of you on the next episode. So goodbye for now, and so long, Jeffrey.